And
Sure.
it is very, very common for people to leave a religion like Mormonism and then sort of just be the flip side of the same coin, which is now anything that beforehand, most Mormons like me, anything that said that's positive about the church, any kind of faith promoting rumor that's floating around out there, I'm going to latch onto and I'm going to make that part of my testimony, being extremely uncritical of the source, but simply because it's what I want to believe. It's what supports my belief. And sometimes, if we're not careful, when we flip out of Mormonism, we can just be flipping over a coin.
Welcome, everyone. I've got RFM here with me, and I'm really excited to have a conversation with Radio Free Mormon. So, welcome. Are you so excited to be here?
Excuse me. That was a terrible start. Yeah, I'm very excited to be here. Thank you. It's a Friday morning. It's early, and there's no place I'd rather be than on this podcast. Where will you go?
Oh, thanks. You're such a good liar. All
This
right.
is where I want to go, is on your podcast.
Good. Good. So I thought it would be fun. You're a man of many projects, so I thought it would be fun for you to just tell everybody what all of the projects that you're working on. So you've got your Radio Free Mormon and you got your Shakespeare stuff. Like I just give listeners all the things that you work on.
Sure thing. First off is the Radio Free Mormon, the flagship station, which I started back in October of 2016. So in October, that'll be 8 years, believe it or not. Then there's Mormonism Live, which I've been doing with Bill Reel for going on 4 years now. We're in our 4th year of production of that. Then in December, I think it was, of last year, we started up another panel show. It was a live show called the Mormon Newscast that airs at it's Monday evening, 5 o'clock Pacific, 6 o'clock Mountain. And then I went ahead and at the beginning of the year, I did something really, really dumb, which is I gave myself 2 additional weekly podcasts to do on top of the Mormonism Live, which is weekly every Wednesday, the Mormon Newscast, which is weekly every Monday, Radio Free Mormon, which I try and do a weekly podcast on. I added 2 more, one of which was Mormon Sunday School, and that was a weekly, and Brush Up Your Shakespeare. So only 5. There's only 5.
Oh, dears.
And so I did that for a few months, and then I realized that I had hopelessly overburdened. I was too optimistic on my abilities to put out all of these podcasts on a weekly basis. I realized after a few months that if I was going to continue that schedule, the quality of the podcast was going to drop substantially. That's one bridge I didn't want to go over. So I am in the middle of figuring out exactly how I'm going to schedule all of these things. Some of these things that were going to be weeklies cannot be weeklies anymore. The Sunday School is not a weekly, but I do get to it when I can. The Shakespeare is almost weekly, but not quite. It's been about a week since I put something out, maybe 2 weeks by now. But I have to be able to get to those when I can get to them and still leave room for flexibility, because that's one big thing I had not done. Not only had I overburdened myself, I didn't leave room for flexibility, like when something big happens in Mormonism and I need to talk about it. So that's happened this past week. What I'm trying to do is find the balance. The balance is not going to be doing 5 weekly shows. That much I know. But I'm also going to continue to do all of them just on a less than weekly basis.
So, okay, that's a lot of just plain recording time. And so,
And by the way, except for the ones that are weekly team shows, obviously I'll continue to do those on a weekly basis. Excuse me. Go ahead.
well, right. So with all those that you're doing, I mean, that's a lot of recording time alone on top of your prep work, right? So how much time do you dedicate a week to this? I'm just curious.
Well, let's put it this way. I have retired from the practice of law, and now I try and struggle to make sure that I'm not doing any work on Sunday. So I work 6 hours, 6 days a week.
Oh, wow.
6 hours a week. I wish that were the way it was.
Yeah, I don't even work that much. So on this podcast,
There is a lot of prep time that goes into it that people watching a lot of times don't recognize. if people have done something like this, then they're better able to recognize the amount of work that goes into this. Sometimes people ask me, how much time did you devote to researching for a particular podcast? And sometimes I will tell them 40 years because there's all that time as well, in addition to the time that I spend prepping immediately before
Right.
a podcast. Last night, I did this thing about my trip to London. I could not believe how many hours it took to work with the pictures, put them in slides, get them in order. Yeah, that is the lion's share of work, is the preparation. Then there's the recording, then there's the editing,
Yep.
and then there's the production. Fortunately, Bill Reel so far has done the thumbnails. I may be learning how to do that myself, so he doesn't have to do it. Not that he's complaining. Anyway, yeah, there's a lot of time. I would imagine it would be, gosh, what do you think? 6 to 8 hours for every hour of podcasting?
It depends on the episode, but I spend quite a bit of time in post-production. And I know a lot of people don't do a lot of editing when they're publishing their stuff out. But yeah, especially at first, I was spending like a whole Saturday to do one episode, especially if they were longer than an hour. So they get longer than an hour and it's even worse. But yeah, it does take a lot of time. So how do you feel like your Radio Free Mormon podcast is the longest? Do you feel like that has stayed true to however you started it, or has it changed over time? Like probably topics are running out, maybe?
No, that's the amazing thing.
No?
Because I would have thought so. I'm surprised as anybody that I'm still podcasting at RFM after almost 8 years. And there's no sign of, stopping in terms of the material that I want to cover.
Okay. So are you covering stuff that's like news? I know I've listened to several of your podcasts. The ones that caught my attention were like the CES talk that I can't remember who gave it, but basically that truth is not very useful.
Yeah, that was the very first one that I did.
It?
That's the first Radio Free Mormon episode. It was based upon a dismantling, or at least an analysis, of Boyd K. Packer's famous talk from 1981.
The mantle is far greater than the intellect. Or
What?
something.
What?
The mantle is far greater than the intellect. That's right.
Except you missed the far. The mantle is far greater than the intellect.
Yeah, that one really bothered me.
And so,
yeah, I had caught that episode, and then I think there was a couple of other episodes. But so, see, to me, those are like pillars of the problems, right? And I don't know that you're going to make new pillars. So are your newer episodes, do they have to do with like news coming down the pike? Like news?
I did do a series of newscasts at the end of last year related to the Tim Ballard case and the allegations there. There have also been other cases. A lot of times when I do newscasts, it's a cross section between Mormonism and crime.
Okay.
And so since I was a lawyer for 34 years, technically I still am a lawyer in that I have my bar license still, in spite of the best efforts of certain parties. Yeah, I'm talking to you, Jen Camp. And but I still got it. I still got my bar card. So technically I'm still attorney, but I'm not representing anybody anymore. I've gone full time into podcasting.
Okay. So yeah, so I guess I don't know. I was just curious if it had changed, like if your reasons for doing it have changed, or if anything has changed from in the last 8 years since you've been doing it. But not really.
It would be nice to think so. I would say the fact that I have segued out of law and into podcasting full time is the main thing that I think that's changed.
Okay.
I mean, a few weeks ago, I did a show with Kara Burrell where we were analyzing a recent talk at Fair Mormon Conference by Steve Densley, I think it was. Yeah, Steve Densley. And I do enjoy analyzing these kinds of things. I have developed a skill over the years of being able to read texts or listen to people talk and being able to readily identify the things that they're not saying, the things that they're indicating, and all sorts of things that I can find in their talks. Now, I don't think I'm reading too much into it. You'd have to listen to an analysis to see if you agree with it. However, the reason that I'm so good at detecting disingenuousness and half-truths in statements or talks by people is because I've already spent 34 years as an attorney reading thousands and thousands of pages of police reports.
Police
Yes,
report.
police
What does
reports.
that have to do with it? I don't get it. I'm
Well,
missing the connection.
that's where you're going to find tons and tons of half statements, spinning, not saying everything, indicating something. Yeah.
Okay. So you have to read through and try to understand what really happened, or is that what you're saying from the
Yes.
statement of
There are
the?
certain things when you compare a police report, this isn't all the time, but it does happen quite frequently. You compare the police report with what the legal requirements are, whether it's for stopping somebody, whether it's for arresting them. And then sometimes you can look at this and you can say, it's interesting that you're not mentioning this fact, because
Mhm.
this fact, if you had mentioned it, would have made the stop or the arrest legal. So why aren't you mentioning that? Well, the odds are, if it's something they're not mentioning, but it favors their case, it's because it never happened.
Mm,
And then sometimes there has to be a follow-up interview with the
okay.
police officer to nail that down.
Hmm. So that's interesting. Don't you feel like too, though, there's a case to be made where you're like, you already know where you're ending up and you're just trying to argue to be right versus you're arguing to lay out the facts of, like, I don't think people are very good at laying out the facts in general. Like, humans aren't very good at that. So if you're going to be talking about something, you have like an end goal in mind and you're going to get closer and closer to the end goal. Um, I guess I don't know what I'm totally trying. I guess it doesn't surprise me that apologists do this because everybody's doing this. So it's not necessarily unique to apologetics, if that makes sense. Or is it?
Oh, no, apologetics happens in probably every field
Right.
that somebody feels strongly about a certain position in religion. Obviously, that's your religious beliefs. And apologists are there to defend those and to
Uh-huh.
make those rational and hopefully plausible and get people to believe it. Now, apologists have to exist only because there are arguments being made against whatever that religion is. Let's just say it's Mormonism because that's what we're here for, right?
Right.
So yeah, and I was an apologist for many, many, many years, and that's because there are so many arguments that are made against the church that it takes quite a number of years, at least it did for me, to get myself uh, knowledgeable enough in the arguments against the church and the answers to them that I finally felt that I was in a position that I knew most of them, at least.
Okay. You mentioned that it happens in every field. Would you say it happens in the ex-Mormon field as well?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure, it
What?
happens everywhere. And
Sure.
it is very, very common for people to leave a religion like Mormonism and then sort of just be the flip side of the same coin, which is now anything that beforehand, most Mormons like me, anything that said that's positive about the church, any kind of faith promoting rumor that's floating around out there, I'm going to latch onto and I'm going to make that part of my testimony, being extremely uncritical of the source, but simply because it's what I want to believe. It's what supports my belief. And sometimes, if we're not careful, when we flip out of Mormonism, we can just be flipping over a coin. And now we're doing the same thing, only on the other side. And I have to try and resist that tendency, which is I'm going to believe any um, critical rumor, any rumor out there that's critical of the church. I'm going to latch on to that. And I'm not going to be very concerned about the sourcing of it or where it came from. It's just that, well, it's something that's negative about the church. That's now my worldview. And therefore I'll adopt that.
Mhm. Yeah, we definitely, yeah, I think humans in general are guilty of that. I wouldn't pin it on any group of people. It's like it's an easy thing to do, right?
Well, yeah. Who was it? It was one psychologist, Jung. I think it was Jung, Carl Jung, who said that thinking is hard work. That's why most people just judge.
Hmm, that is interesting. Um, so so what motivates you to keep podcasting? So now you're doing it full time. Um, is I I'll be honest, like there's a part of me that I morally like feel wrong about making money on doing something like that. Is there have you gone through that phase? of not wishing like not feeling like it's morally good to make money off of this type of content. And I don't know, I'm not asking the question very well, but I
Well, what I think is that
get what I'm trying to
there's
say.
no more important thing that I could be doing than producing this kind of content. In fact, the reason I went full time is because in November of 2021, when I was down in Salt Lake City for that debate,
Mhm.
but also for the Thrive Conference, the debate with the Mormons. Sorry, I have to train my tongue to say it correctly. The Midnight Mormons. Um, that was Saturday night. The next day was Thrive.
Yeah.
And what happened there was that I had a brief presentation at the very beginning of the entire day's worth of talks that were being given. And that was perfect. It was 15 minutes. I got up, did it. Then I didn't have to worry about it anymore. That's why I consider that to be the perfect time to do it right off the bat. Then I don't have to worry or sweat it out for the rest of the day that, my time's coming up. Anyway, got done, 10 o'clock in the morning, headed out of the huge room, 13,000 people in there. It was massive at the Salt, what's it called? The Salt Palace. That's what it's called, right? Down there in Salt Lake City. So at the Salt Palace, I left, went to the bathroom, came back through the lobby, nice big lobby, and somebody said hi. They recognized me, and I talked to them for a bit. Then somebody else is passing by, and they come in, they want to talk to me, and I talk to them. And one thing leads to another. And before the day is out, I am being surrounded by crowds of people. By the way, the end of the story is I never make it back into the conference center. I never make it back into the huge room with the 13,000 people. I am in the lobby all day long until it was around 5, 6 o'clock at night. It's getting dark outside. All of a sudden, everybody's coming out of the conference center, and I'm going, oh my gosh, this has gone on all day. And I said to my friend who was with me, Randy Bell, I said, good grief, I had to sit here and talk with people all day here in the lobby. I can't believe that. And he says, yeah, are you not understanding? I said, what? What am I not understanding? He said, you were sitting here or standing here in the lobby all day talking to people. And these people are saying such things to me, very vulnerable things to me about how it is that my show has helped them so much with their processing of things that a lot of people have felt like they were going crazy because they were starting to see things in Mormonism that they were not supposed to see, that they have been encouraged not to see, but they're seeing them anyway. And there's a lot of gaslighting that goes on in the church, and that can cause someone to feel like they're the crazy ones.
Mhm.
So I'm a voice that people listen to, a lot of people listen to, that helps them understand no, they're not crazy. This really is a phenomenon about Mormonism. And what ended up happening was that night, I realized that I was having an impact far beyond what I had thought I had. I mean, I'm just sitting at a microphone, right, talking, and then it broadcasts. These are actual people that I'm meeting.
Mhm.
And so at that time, I thought, okay, well, I have a career in law where I try and help out people who are charged with crimes, and that is the main part of my entire practice was criminal defense. But what is better, to help a few people, a handful of people charged with crimes, or to help hundreds of people who are going through what is frequently the most traumatic experience that a person experiences in their life,
Mhm.
which is disengaging from a high demand fundamentalist religion like Mormonism? And at that point, it was a no brainer. It wasn't even close. And I thought, if I can make this work, I need to go into podcasting full time because the impact I'm making there is far above and beyond the impact I'm making as an attorney.
That that's yeah, that probably was eye-opening for you. Do you feel like that is what motivates the leaders in the church too? Because you have similar stories where people will be converted to the church and their lives were saved from like substance abuse or nihilism or whatever it is, and the church saves them out of their hellhole. And so, like, do you think that's what motivates people to keep the church rolling, or
I
is
think
that
the church, I have no idea what's in their minds, but I sense that it's not. I sense that the motivation to keep the church rolling is that the church needs to keep rolling. It needs to keep moving. And so the leaders of the church And actually, I think we need to come up with a different name than church leaders, because they're not leaders. They don't lead in any meaningful way that I can tell. All they are is managers, and they manage the church and they manage the money, but they try and keep it rolling. They try and keep it going, because if it stops, then, that's bad for anybody, any organization. You can't stop. You got to keep going. But now they're at the point where things are going so badly, except for the finances. But as far as membership goes, they're losing membership. They're building more temples. That's their response. Temples that the membership numbers do not require or even indicate. So it is as if, while the membership numbers are dropping, while the number of wards are shrinking, or at least the members in the ward are shrinking. What I mean is this: used to be 200 members, basically active members for a ward. They're shrinking those down so they don't have to have as many members in the ward, so they can try and keep the ward numbers up in order to keep the stake numbers up and not be collapsing. They are taking fewer wards with the fewer people to make a stake.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going through all of these gymnastics in order to hide the fact that the church membership is shrinking. And yet they're building more and more temples. And at the end of last conference, which I was reporting on every session, when they got to the 15, I think it was, temples that they announced, I'm just sitting here thinking, what on earth is this spectacle about? You don't need any more temples. At this point, it is garish. At this point, it is completely over the top and nonsensical to be spending millions of dollars building temples that are not going to be used.
I don't know. I can't say it bothers me that much, but maybe it should. I think, Hinckley, I was practicing when Hinckley was, and he went and did a whole bunch of temples, and he made them more practical, so that not big extravagant buildings, so that people could have them closer to them, Yeah, I can definitely, so in Scientology, they have these big empty buildings as well. And so it's hard to not see it that way. I get your point.
Well, I'm hearing reports that, you used to go to the temple, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And you go to the temple on a day when it's other than, what was it, Sunday?
Friday night? Oh,
yeah.
Sorry. Friday night, date night was always packed.
When they're open, you go in, you do a session, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah, but since COVID, it's changed. You have to do a schedule. You have to schedule it, right?
Yes, you have to schedule, because they're not having round-the-clock sessions. That's why you have to schedule. They're limiting the number of sessions that they're doing in each temple.
So they don't have to have temple workers sitting there all day when nobody's even coming through.
When nobody's there. So if this sounds familiar to you, if you're having fewer members per ward, it's Oak Mountain wards, and you're having fewer people going to the temple.
Yeah. Denver, there weren't a lot of people that went to the temple. And I remember if we'd go during the week or something, the sessions were tiny. Like we were the witness couple all the time. Because there just wasn't anybody there.
The Mormon church is becoming a Potemkin village.
Yeah.
And it's only slightly ironic because a number of years ago, President Uchtdorf mentioned Potemkin village in one of his talks. And he described what it was, which I'm not sure I knew before then. But this Potemkin village being building these fake villages just with facades on a river in order to make the people who are passing by on the river, who are enemies or whatever, think that you're stronger than you are, and that you have more buildings than you do. And so they would just keep going by and not get off and decide to raid. Well, nothing describes the LDS church and its temple building mania any better today than a Potemkin village, because that's all these temples are.
Yeah, it very well could be. Like, they're not very transparent with numbers of people participating in real ways. They just
and why is that?
That's
And that's one of the things I like to try and get behind, is recognizing there are certain facts that appear to be out there, but trying to get behind that and say, why is that? And this is a real easy one. Let me ask you, why is it that the church is not transparent about numbers in any given area?
Because they might need to change them later to mean something else.
You may be, and you may be right. My answer is even more simple than that. You see, I try and get very simple, and I've made a living out of stating the obvious, which is this, is that the reason you tell numbers over here, right? But in this one area, you don't tell the numbers. The reason why is because you think that telling those numbers is going to hurt your position.
Hmm.
So usually people are transparent in areas where they're proud of what it is that they're doing because they think that makes them look good. If they're not transparent in other areas, it's because those things don't make them look good. So we're not going to talk about those.
Hmm.
I guarantee you, if the numbers in the areas where they're not transparent were good, they'd be talking about them.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know. I guess I give them the benefit of the doubt, though. I
I
think that
used to.
I think they are doing what they think is right, just like you think you're doing what is right, and so you do it.
No,
It's
this
not.
is
It's
very
not.
different, though. You can put it. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. Is that
You're
okay?
good. You're good.
Okay, because what you said just made me think of this, which is that yes, they're doing what they think is right. Yes, I think I'm doing what is right, but the definition of right is very different in both instances. What I think is right is trying to find out what the truth is. And
Okay.
mainly it's the truth for me. I podcast about what it is that I think. Other people seem to find it interesting, entertaining, or perhaps they agree with my thoughts or it reflects them. This is something that happens often with comments that I get from viewers, which is I'm expressing thoughts that they themselves have had,
Yes.
but never wanted to say. And then
Yeah.
there's another variation of that, which is I'm expressing thoughts that they had never quite thought or put together in that way,
Yep.
but immediately, yes, they realize
Yep.
this is correct. This is something that I've been struggling toward, but didn't know I was struggling toward it until I heard it.
Mm-hmm.
So having said that, that's what is right for me is doing. When you talk about church leaders doing what is right, they're not looking for the truth. They have already decided on what the truth is.
Okay.
And the truth is that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is absolutely 100% God's kingdom on the earth. And therefore, from their point of view, what is right is not seeking truth. It's protecting the truth that they believe they've already found.
And spreading the truth, right?
Yeah, and spreading it, yes, to as many people as possible on the backs of as many young men and women as they can find to do their bidding. And I was one
Wow.
of them.
This is going to open up a little bit of a rabbit hole, RFM. So you believe that there is truth out there. It's not just your truth?
Do I believe that there's truth out there?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So there's this pretty deep rabbit hole about realizing that you can't know what the truth is. And so therefore, people that try to claim that they have the truth cause a lot of harm to other people by trying to claim that they have the truth. And so the venture of even trying to claim that there is an objective truth to be found in itself is a bad venture. And it's kind of, it's just like a postmodern thought to go, there is no truth out there. It's just power and people trying to gain control of other people by claiming they have the truth. But since I'm of the belief that it's of value to try to find out what the truth is and to have the humility to think that I don't know what it is, right? I have
Right.
my best guess of what it is. I don't know. I guess there's a part of me that feels like organized religion, it is not scientifically true, but there is truth to it. And so, and that's the truth that they feel drawn toward, the truth that their testimony, that supports their testimony, that there is something good there that's worth preserving and worth propagating. I wouldn't even necessarily, I liked the way that you put it, by the way. Like you are just a master with words and you've articulated it so well. And there's like this part of me that agrees with you. And then I have this other part of me that's like, I think that organized religion does have a place because it is a kind of truth that is not propositional truth, even though unfortunately apologists will defend the propositional truth, but there's another truth there that's more like of a pragmatic truth or like a way to operate in the world kind of truth that it's passing down and keeping alive, if that makes sense. I don't know. That was a lot of rambling. What are your
Well,
thoughts?
I think the church does a good job of teaching positive principles to its members. And I think it does a great job for those members who are still in the first half of life, which is where you want structure. you are not really formed yet. You need structure. You need some kind of discipline. You need something to move you along and a system to believe and to be part of
Yeah.
wholeheartedly. And I was that. But then when you grow up and you continue to mature, then the second half of life is where you start questioning those things and you start thinking for yourself. You've gained the tools that you need through the first half of life
Mhm.
in order to help you think through issues for yourself. You're not relying on other people telling you
Yeah.
what's true and how to live your life down to excruciating detail,
Sure.
like in Mormonism. And Mormonism is not built to help people in the second half of life. It is built in order to keep people from entering into the second half of life. It's built to keep people and its members from maturing to that point. Now, the interesting thing is that back in 1984 in October General Conference, I know you know the talk I'm talking about, which was Elder, what was his name, who gave the talk that they changed?
Oh, I don't know. But yeah, I
Oh,
don't
come
remember.
on now. This is terrible. I have this on the, I know this name, but I
Well,
just can't.
as
Oh,
far
Pullman.
as
I didn't look it up. Okay. Pullman. I was just about to Google it. Yeah, Elder Ronald E. Pullman, I think it was. Ronald E. Pullman. And he was a 70 and he was a lawyer and he gave a really, really boring talk, like just about every other talk in General Conference. But the content of his talk got people all excited because what he actually said in General Conference was what I've been saying, which is the gospel gets you to a certain point, and that's the point of the gospel, so that you can then become independent and in a way transcend the church. Because now you've learned what you need to do, and now it's time for you to pick up and start making your own way and not just walk in the way that's been directed for you. He
yeah.
didn't use those words. He talked about that theme. And that is the talk. That is a talk that got so much controversy inside the church that they said, no, we cannot have this be part of General Conference, even though it's after the fact and we don't have a time machine. We can go back into the tabernacle, which is where General Conference was held into the tabernacle after conference is over and put the same speaker up on the stand
Oh,
and
yeah.
have him do
It's really bad.
a revised version of his talk that says you never outgrow the church and you always have to be part of it. So that was not just an incident that showed how micromanaging church leadership is of things that its leaders say, but also how deceptive they were in going about it. It's not just that, it is that, but it's also this is what was being taught, and this was the reaction to it, because they cannot have anybody saying that there's a time when a member of the church is grown up enough to start carving their own way and figuring things out for themselves. They must remain dependent upon the prophets, apostles, seers, and revelators in the LDS church.
Yeah. So I feel like this is like a paradox that can't be solved. And so if a church is really open to people growing and going beyond, then it's not going to be bound together as tightly. And so the more freedom that the teachings give you, the less together you get, and then you get less of that benefit of actually having something real to pass down from generation to generation. When I say real, I mean it feels real. It's real. It's coherent enough to pass down, because like when you do get into your second half of life, it's a lot of mumbo jumbo and you can't quite agree, and it's kind of dependent on your personality where you gravitate toward, and it's not really passed downable. I don't feel like to your kids and to their kids, and it doesn't stay the same. So it's just interesting. It's not like I don't disagree with you. I think that that's right. I think that the church does encourage you to be naive. It encourages you,
Naive in their favor.
yeah, and well, and just naive. Like I feel like there's a big naivety of like, oh, you're a part of my club, therefore you couldn't possibly do anything bad. And so just an automatic trust
Mhm.
that's very naive as well. I've seen happen in real world applications. But
I
I
agree with you. And can I flip that coin and say there's also a naive mistrust of anybody who's not a member of the church.
Oh,
And President
sure.
Nelson played on that recently in General Conference by telling the members, don't listen to anything that somebody who's not a member of the church has to say.
Do you know what though? That's interesting is that when you actually do get to know somebody outside of the church and you realize how good of a person they are, that can really be an issue for you. Uh, yeah, it can cause a lot of cognitive dissonance there.
Mhm.
But anyways, so kind of back to I do believe there are quite a few people that handle a collapse of belief or the second half of life within the church, and I think they're just fine. It's almost like they kind of grow up and they don't let the church tell them what to do. Like in a parent situation, like if you had a parent in your adulthood and you have a parent that's still trying to tell you what to do, some people are able to grow up and be like, no, I'm a grown up now. And it's just interesting because I do see people participate in the church still, and they seem to manage that just fine. I I kind of wonder personally if my personality wasn't conducive of that kind of thing because mine. I am very like I don't know. Well, for lack of better word, I'm an engineer, so like that it is what it is, and you told me that's what it is, so that's what it is. Like I had a hard time breaking out of any other kind of thinking like that. So, but I've talked to people that have remained in the church. They go through this growth process, I would call it, and they can still participate in the church and support the church. And um, I don't know, like I would put like Terrell Givens and those Richard Bushman. I would put them in that camp. Like they're clearly not believing in the same kind of Mormonism that I left.
Right.
And I never went through that phase really. Like I decided that I didn't want to be a part of it anymore. But I don't know. Anyway, those are thoughts that I'm having here.
Well,
Super
I
random.
think that there are two main kinds of Mormons, okay? There are those who really, really believe and those who really, really take it seriously. And then there are those who don't take it as seriously. And I'm talking about active members of the church, those who go to church, those who
Mhm.
fulfill callings, etc. Even within that segment, there's going to be people who really, really take it seriously and those who don't really. They're more social Mormons. They're not into the doctrine or into the
Mhm.
patriarchy or into the following the prophet and everything that he necessarily says. And I think that when those two people leave the church, that the one who was a social Mormon is not going to be as affected traumatically or otherwise from leaving the church because they never took it seriously in the first place.
Mhm.
Whereas the other segment, and I was definitely a part of that, who did take it seriously, who patterned your entire life around what it was you were told to do and who made substantial sacrifices in order to live that way.
Mhm.
Then when they end up leaving the church because they realize it's not what they thought it was, it's much more difficult for them
Yeah.
because of the fact they took it seriously, I think.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think that's probably true. Um, you mentioned earlier that you gave the church the benefit of the doubt that you no longer do. When did that flip for you?
Well, it was on April 1st. No, I'm kidding. It
I'm
was
just
not on a specific date.
right. I'm just
But I
curious
went through a very
what got you from there to the other side of that thought.
Yeah, because I mean, I joined the church 1978. I'm buying everything that's being told me. I understand and know that all the apostles in the first presidency have their Thursday morning meetings on the fourth floor of the Salt Lake Temple. And Jesus shows up every week to give them their marching orders for what's coming next and what they need to do. That there are face to face contacts with Jesus Christ going on. And that these apostles and leaders of the LDS church really do speak for God. They are his mouthpieces. And so I went from there to slowly growing up in the church. Now I joined when I was 18. I say growing up because I did grow up in the church, even though I joined at 18. And by that, I mean developing in the church. But studying it so hard, paying such close attention, giving such reverence to these individuals. And then over the course of time, slowly, even though I want to believe that they are prophets, that they actually do speak with Jesus. Because what's more wonderful than that? What's more
Mhm.
assuring than that? knowing that what they say is what Jesus really wants us to know and do. So in spite of the fact I really wanted to continue believing it, thing after thing kept coming up. And finally I realized, these gentlemen, they're not talking to Jesus. They don't see Jesus. And then a little bit beyond that, they're not even inspired. What they say is not inspiring. They've got 10 hours of general conference twice a year. They can't say one inspiring thing. All they can say is the most boring pablum imaginable. And they got 10 hours of it. And so going through that and then going to the position where, okay, they're not inspired. All they're doing is trying to maintain the restoration that Joseph Smith started and initiated and basically completed, which was the position of the church up until recently.
Right.
And I knew that because I read the material. I read what leaders said. And of course, Gordon B. Hinckley seconded that emotion in that interview he had where he said the same thing. That was the position of the church for over 100 years, that Joseph Smith had basically accomplished the restoration. And now we're just waiting for Jesus to come back and wind things up. And of course, now we've got President Nelson talking about the ongoing restoration. But let me see here. What was the thought I was going toward, which was, this is the way it was.
Well, just
What was your question again?
benefit of the doubt. When did that change in your
Thank
mind?
you. The timeline that I was going through. So then I got to the point where I realized they're not inspired. Not only are they not seeing Jesus, they're not even inspiring individuals. They have no inspiration coming from God. So then I thought, okay, well, they're just good men doing the best they can. How many people have said that? I said that. That was a fallback position from actually being apostles, that they're just good men doing the best they can. And then I had that view for a number of years, paying attention, studying, and realizing, nope, they're not even that. They are not even good men doing the best they can, unless you define the best they can as trying to defend the good name of the church. And that's all it's about for them, is defending the good name of the church. And unfortunately, a lot of times when you're defending the good name of the church, that means sweeping under the rugs horrible things that members of the church, up to and including the leaders, by the way, SEC, are doing. So when you get to a position where your definition of doing good is defending an organization or a church, then you are almost, I think, as a rule, going to have to stop being a good person.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm trying to think of, I feel like that happens I guess there's this thing that happened with me where I realized the church is not God's church, and it is in fact just an organization, just like any other organization. Yet I was still holding it to the standard that it was still God's church. And I think as I left, I realized I got to hold it to the same standard that I would any other organization. And any other organization is loyal to itself. And so that shouldn't be surprising to me. I guess you have that, but it's an extra complicated layer for sure. When I do think that they're genuine in their beliefs. I think, I don't know, I don't have any evidence to think otherwise. And so I like to give them the benefit of the doubt.
I expect they're genuine in their beliefs as well.
Right. And so, and where the church is just made up of a whole bunch of individuals that are doing human kind of things. It's just, I guess, I don't find the activity of picking it apart very productive in my mind. Like it just seems like they do what they do. And I don't know, it's not to dismiss things that are bad. Like you definitely want to zero in on that and try to prevent that. But I even think people within the church want to do that. Like they don't want to be sweeping bad things under the rug.
Oh yeah, they do. People in the church definitely want bad things swept under the rug. They are complicit to a large degree in sweeping bad things under the rug, because this is endemic in the church, that the most important thing that we can do is sweep things under the rug so the LDS church doesn't look bad.
Yeah.
Let me make it not quite so controversial. It will lead to the same conclusion, but I jumped to the conclusion and omitted a few intermediate steps. The most important thing is that God's gospel, the true gospel, be communicated to as many people as possible so that they can be saved and go to the celestial kingdom and live forever with their family, right? So in order for that to happen, we have to make the church look as good as possible.
Gotta have good PR. Yeah.
So that people will join, right? And if there's bad PR, people won't join. So
Right.
if we know about bad PR, our job is not to repeat it and to hide it as best we can.
Sure. Yeah. 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 I can't argue with that.
You can if you want. I think that's true. And I also try and put most of my beliefs in terms of I think that's true or I believe this is true because I don't claim to have the monopoly on truth.
Yeah.
One of the most wonderful things about not being active Mormon anymore is not feeling the absolute 24/7 burden on my shoulders of feeling that I need to convert all the non-members I know to Mormonism, that I always have to be presenting Mormonism in a good light to them to hopefully get them, get them interested, get them to want to come to church, invite them to church, whatever it might be.
Plant that seed.
It's a huge, huge burden.
Yeah.
Why? Because I took it seriously,
Yeah.
right? So that was my character makeup. Some people take it seriously. They actually feel bad about not doing it, right? Other people are going, look, just forget about it. I have friends and I'm not going to screw up a friendship by bringing up the church and trying to convert it.
Right. Yeah, you're describing a very real feeling. That's for sure. I wanted to go back. You kind of alluded to something, maybe you weren't, but when you were doing your apologetic stuff, can you describe that a little bit? How long were you an apologist? Like, did you find out information? You're like, oh, I can fix this, and then, hey, I fixed this, and I should share my fixings with everybody else. Like, what did your apologetic years look like?
Well, they started shortly after I joined the church in 1978. My brother was a Jehovah's Witness. There's two brothers other than me, three sons altogether. I'm the youngest. And so the middle brother had become a Jehovah's Witness. I knew a little bit about Jehovah's Witnesses. He brought home some anti-Mormon literature from the Kingdom Hall. I read it. I was surprised. I was stunned. And then I ended up, to give you the brief story, I ended up wanting to find answers to this because this is the true church. I've joined it. And these are allegations, which knocked me off my footing at first. But I thought, okay, I want to find the answers to these questions. And then I was off and running, and I did it through my mission in terms of certain books that I was able to get and read, like Joseph Fielding Smith's Answers to Gospel Questions, all 5 or 6 volumes. It was in those a set.
Wow.
And I just love those. And trying to find scriptures that prove certain things about Mormonism. And then the 1980s, I was off and running. Not only am I in college and doing all these other things, but I'm also studying Mormonism like crazy with an eye toward apologetics. So by the end of the 1980s, I taught an institute class.
Oh, wow.
On the subject of defending the faith.
No way. There was a class?
Well, yeah, it's mine. I made it.
Oh.
There is no class on there was no class at the time anyway on defending the faith.
But
And
you
I
taught
thought
it at an
there should be one.
institute building. Like
Yeah.
if I were in that institute building, I could have taken that class. That's crazy.
Yeah. So that was
That's good.
1989 spring semester. Did that. I'd been there for 10 years or at least since 1981. And I knew the institute director, and he begrudgingly gave me permission to do it. I know he set in for the first several classes to make sure I wasn't going to screw things up too badly. And I've taken those, the first 11 of the 12. The 12th, I was taping them at the time, and the 12th tape didn't work out for whatever reason. But I posted them on RFM, all the different lessons on the Defending the Faith class, 1 through 11.
When
It's
did
a
you
little
post
sketchy
those?
as far as being able to understand it. I think you can understand it. I sounded quite a bit younger. But yeah, that's what I did.
You did the audio. So it's audio or it's an actual video?
It's audio. It
Okay.
was on cassette tape.
Okay.
I also wrote a manuscript.
Which
the time.
episodes of RFM is that?
It's kind of here and there, but it's been a while.
If
you look up RFM Defending the Faith,
it'll come up.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. So,
when I wrote a manuscript that was responding to a book that was an anti-Mormon book, and I did a bunch of research for it. It never got published. That's okay. But I did a ton of research on this book. And it was during this time period that, I was aware of the fact that Mormon apologists frequently accused anti-Mormons of doing underhanded things and committing certain egregious logical fallacies.
Well, did it happen? Did you see it happen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, yeah.
Absolutely. And I talk about that in some of my this unpublished manuscript. and in other places. The
Okay.
thing that really, really disappointed me was when I started seeing that Mormon apologists
Did the same
frequently
thing.
did the same things that they
Right.
were accusing the anti-Mormons of.
Hmm. And most of the anti-Mormons that were active, were they like coming from more of a secular standpoint or a Christian standpoint?
Christian standpoint at the time
Okay.
in the 1980s in Texas. Yeah.
Okay. Did you ever work with organizations, like an organization, apologetic organization, or you just were kind of on your own and you were willing to do this on your own time?
I was pretty much on my own, doing it
Wow.
on my own. I'm in Texas. Texas was a lot further from Utah back in the 1980s than it is today
Yeah.
with the internet and everything. But yeah, so I'm working on my stuff. I'm reading all the stuff that Farms is putting out, coming up with ideas of my own, writing a few papers, submitting them to Farms for publication, getting rejected. And then finally, in the early 1990s, I submitted a paper and it was published in the Journal of Book of Mormon Studies, which is put out by Farms. And so I was very, very excited about that. I thought it was a great piece of apologetics for the Book of Mormon. And at any rate, there's two different kinds of apologetics, right? One is defending claims being made. The other is trying to make an affirmative case
Yeah.
for something.
How
And
could
this was
still be
more,
true.
yeah, this is more along the lines of an affirmative case for something. But so I ended up getting published then. The next year, I was published in the same venue, Journal of Book of Mormon Studies. Then 2006, I think it was, I got published in BYU Studies
Mhm.
with a historical analysis, which I was really excited about being published there. And then again in 2014, another paper published in BYU Studies. So I have been published a number of times, but I haven't been affiliated in any greater degree with any of these apologetic organizations.
Mhm. All right. Not to beat a dead horse, but I want to change the subject back to your motivations to do the podcast. And it's from people saying that it's helpful. And I think that is like the definition of audience capture a little bit, isn't that? Do you know what audience capture is?
No, I'm not sure I do.
It's like this idea, especially with personalities, that are, you have a personality and a public personality, right? And it's where you have an audience that likes something, and so then you keep producing more of the things that they like and less of the
Mhm,
things that they don't like, and so then
mhm.
you're not aiming toward like a truth, if you will, but you're aiming toward more of what your audience likes. And so yeah, I
You're
guess,
saying you get captured by your audience.
yes, that's correct. So is that something that you have thought about, worry about, try to prevent? If so, anyway, is that something that you think about? Because I think, um, yeah, well, I'll let you answer.
Okay. Well, not really, because I find Mormonism absolutely fascinating. And I'm fascinated by the arguments that are sometimes made for Mormonism. I mean, I've 34 years as a lawyer. I deal with arguments and dissecting arguments and trying to find flaws in arguments and trying to make my arguments better.
Hmm.
Right. So there's been a spate recently, and this is not going to answer your question directly. Hopefully, I'll circle my way into it. But talking about these arguments made by general authorities for why it is that the church is true. And there's a pattern going on in the last number of years where they want to have their talks and their arguments be able to prove the church is true without ever once encountering or dealing with any evidence
Right.
whatsoever.
That's what your episode with Kara was about.
Yeah. And that's just the recent example of this kind of thing. And it's sort of this art form where they try and answer a question or put people's questions to rest without ever dealing with the questions themselves
Hmm.
and trying to put it in a framework that shows that those questions just aren't important. But it fails every single time because once you identify what it is they're doing, you realize that they're trying to deal with the situation without dealing with the situation.
Sure.
And I think this is endemic in Mormonism. They keep trying to deal with things without dealing with them, with the result that things are going, I think they're going crazy right now. I
Well,
think
and
that,
I
yeah.
actually think if they had addressed this issue of Sandra Tanner's issues
Mhm,
way back in the 70s when
mhm.
they had the chance, it wouldn't be as big of a problem now. Like they chose to ignore it and the internet blew it up. It's
Yes.
So it's I think it's an archetypal story of like you ignoring something and the dragon grows bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it becomes something that is like massive that you have to take care of later. Like you might as well take care of it while it's small. Does that
Yeah,
make
or
sense?
like yeah,
Like
or
they
like
were able
Richard
to ignore it and people didn't know about it, right? And so
yeah, like Richard Dreyfuss puts it in one line when he's talking to the mayor of Amity in the movie Jaws. He says, "I think you're going to ignore this particular problem until it swims up and bites you in the ass."
yeah. Yep.
That's what
So
happens.
yeah. So
Sometimes we ignore things and they go away,
yeah,
but usually they get worse. And
they certainly can.
yeah,
So I feel like that's where a lot of the dishonesty probably happened was during B.H. Roberts' time, where he's like showing them, "Hey, might have a problem here," and they
mhm.
chose to just ignore it. I think had they been honest about addressing it and been, I think, I think they, I think it would have been better. Like it would have been better today.
Well, the playbook of the church has been consistent and longstanding, which is if there's something that is going to promote lack of belief in the LDS church, if there's some kind of criticism out there,
Yeah,
then we're going to ignore it. And we're going to try and get our members to not encounter it and not find it. We're going to try and hide it so the members don't know about it.
I
And
do
that's what
see it.
that talk by Boyd K. Packer was all about, hiding negative information about the church, telling the teachers of the church, the professors, the institute teachers, the seminary teachers, everybody, hide it, hide it, hide it. Because if they find out, if the students find out about it, then it could negatively impact their testimony. They might leave the church. They might end up not going to the celestial kingdom. Therefore, it is the right thing and the good thing to keep the members in the dark about the church that they belong to and about the church that we as leaders are asking them to sacrifice their lives for.
Yeah, that brings up that naive thing. They encourage you to be naive. You don't have to worry about you being naive because we'll protect you, but they can't
Just
protect
trust
you.
us.
Yeah, I
Who
yeah.
says that? Somebody you shouldn't trust. But that was President Ballard. Just trust us
Yeah.
because we wouldn't lie to you.
Um, so that also makes me think of, oh shoot, I had a thought there about off ramps for the church. Like, uh, do you want to allow the church off ramps? So it's like here they are, they're publishing saints now. They're being a lot more transparent, and I understand that it's still going through correlation, and they still try to spin it in a faithful perspective.
Mhm.
But had it not been for the church publishing saints, I'm not sure I would have gained the courage to leave church sources to, because it was reading saints that I came to the conclusion that the church was not um, the most objectively true source of information about the church, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they're the worst. If you want to compare
And
anti-Mormons with Mormons in talking about accuracy of church information, the church loses every time. They are the most inaccurate and the least forthcoming
yeah.
about church information to its members and to the world.
Well, see, when I was reading Saints, I was reading some of the original sources, and that's when I came to a similar conclusion. I was like, okay, if I'm going to be donating 10% of my money, I think I ought to know what at least the critics say. And that was the first time that I had that, the courage to do that was because I read Saints, which was published by the church, though, is what I'm saying. So there is a level of transparency that I think they should get credit for.
Well,
That
complete opaqueness is a level of transparency too.
Well, it's still better than nothing though. Like it's just not nothing anymore. And I think it's in an effort to be able to say we didn't lie to you or keep this from you, because I think they heard a lot of people say that and they probably couldn't deny it, and so then they do publish some of it, right?
Well, I
But
think
anyway, back to off ramps. Like,
oh,
I
can I tell you about Saints and then we'll
yes,
come back to
yes,
off-ramps?
yes, yeah,
And very quickly,
yeah.
yeah, the
In
only
1 minute,
reason they're being more transparent, by the way, that's correct, and that says it all, which means that they have not been as transparent in
sure,
the past as they are being now, and they still
yeah,
have room to be more transparent.
yeah,
So this is not, I mean, it's a trajectory that's going in the right direction, but the thing is that even as they're being more transparent, they're trying to spin things in order to hide things still from their membership.
yeah.
And the only reason that they're doing that is because they've already been caught hiding things.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have to come out and be public about it because it's reached critical mass. So many members, because of the internet, have found out these issues related to the church.
Yeah.
That once it gets to a certain point, they feel that they have to start talking about them as well. But it's the classic case of the kid who gets caught with his hand in the cookie jar. When I was a kid, my parents would accuse me of things, believe it or not, even though I was perfect in every way. But they would accuse
Right.
me of doing something wrong. And then I would start playing this little game with them, this little dance of question and answer, where I would try and probe them to find out what it was that they really had evidence on me that I had done wrong and what it is that they were just speculating on. And I would, if they had enough evidence that they had me cold, I would admit to that much that they had evidence on. But the stuff that they didn't have evidence on, I would deny till my dying day, even though, yeah, they were right about that too. They just didn't have the evidence on me. And I see the same kind of psychological thing going on with the church. They will admit to the stuff they've been caught doing, but anything else they're still going to hide. And I think that tracks what I'm seeing them do.
So no off ramp because they're not doing it because they know they should do it. They're doing it because they feel like they have no choice.
Well, right, because go back to what we talked about before. Their definition of doing the right thing is protecting the church.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I feel like, in general, I feel like there could be given more off ramps for the organization because
When you say an off ramp, what do you mean?
well, just that. Like, I mean, the example we just used is a good example. So if you say the church should be more transparent, when the church is more transparent, you say, "Good job, church, for being more transparent." You don't say, "Yeah, but." And so there's a lot of yeah buts coming from post-Mormons, ex-Mormons. So there is nothing the church can do that will be good. If the church continues to do what it does, bad church. If the church updates, well, now you're gaslighting people. And so those are the options for the church. There is no off-ramp for the church. The church must
Oh, sure there is. Sure there
well,
is. There's an absolute off ramp. And it's
okay.
right there in front of them. And it's right there in their own teachings. And it's what they tell us to do, but they themselves refuse to do, which is number one, be honest. And number two, do what is right and let the consequence follow. If the church would stop teaching us to do it exclusively and actually as a leadership do it themselves, that's the off ramp. I know it sounds radical, doesn't it? That they should actually do what they've been teaching us to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know. What would that look like?
What it looks like is coming out and being clear with people and saying, look, there's a lot of people in the church who, for whatever reason, and I think we promoted it in our own materials because we did, that we actually see Jesus. Well, we don't see Jesus.
I would like that one too.
Now,
Yeah,
there are certain
right.
people, and Elder Oaks is actually one of them, who from time to time will indicate that no, the revelation that they get is the
It's
same.
not
as
over the
they
pulpit
expect us to get.
in the 10-hour conference talk, though. It's in
Right.
some obscure state conference. So Elder Bednar has one. I went down this rabbit hole where
Okay.
that's where I became convinced that they're not seeing Jesus, is because I found a bunch of side stuff that indicated that they would admit it as much. Elder Bednar's the most, but it's always on these like fireside stuff.
Yeah.
It's never over the pulpit. So
Well, there
it's
was that
not enough
huge
for me.
rescue, the Boise rescue, where Elder Oaks went out there with Rick Turley to try and quash the flames of Denver snufferism that were threatening to engulf the church out there in Boise. And he goes out there and he gives this talk. And this is one of the things he addresses because, of course, Denver snuffer claims to have seen Jesus. So everybody's going, so why don't the apostles claim to see Jesus anymore? You know? So he gets out there and he says, no, we are not witnesses of Jesus. We are witnesses of the name of Jesus Christ, which means we are witnesses of his plan, of his priesthood, of his church, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's one thing. Great. But then he has to follow it up by saying, but just because I say we're witnesses of the name of Jesus doesn't mean that we haven't seen him personally. And there you get the two-step and you go, Elder Oaks, come on, just tell the truth. Quit trying to make room for people to believe the thing that you have insinuated to the church membership for decades when you know it's not true. You know you haven't seen Jesus. You know people think you have. What would be wrong with correcting that misapprehension that you yourself are responsible for giving.
That's actually what Elder Bednar did in an interview with like a CES employee, and it's not audio. It's just a
You have to read lips.
yeah. It's a written down interview.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's in writing. The interview is in writing. It's not in video or audio format. But that's actually the reason I felt like I couldn't participate at church anymore, is because I wanted to act like I believed without actually believing, and that felt dishonest to me because I felt people were making assumptions about my beliefs based on me acting like a regular member that was just acting like everybody else. Like there was a part of me that felt dishonest and disingenuous about that. So that's why I don't go to church anymore.
Did you not feel that you could attend church and have your own personal beliefs about Mormonism?
Well, I did that for a while. And then it, like, even like you accepted a calling because I wanted to help out still. And here I am, a young women leader, and I'm totally out on all the supernatural stuff, and that's what half the lessons are on. And so just being, even if I'm not the one teaching the lesson, and I'm teaching a lesson on gratitude and how it's good to be have a grateful perspective in life and how that's going to help you for XYZ reason, because I do believe that. So I'll teach stuff I do believe. I still had a hard time just holding that calling and the assumptions that would be made about my beliefs just because I was practicing in that. Like I would have a hard time with my belief right now and being like a high up leadership position in the church too.
Yes.
Like it's not honest. So unless I could honestly get up and say, hey, by the way, I'm pretty agnostic in my beliefs, but I think this is a great way to pass on good traditions and good teachings to my kids. So I'm going to keep participating. Like if I could say that, but you can't, that makes people super uncomfortable. It's just not there. We're not there yet.
That's true.
So anyways, well, thank you so much for your time.
You're
it's
welcome.
been a fun
Boy,
chat. Hope
this
you
time has
enjoyed
passed
that.
so quickly.
Yeah, it did fly by. So everyone already knows where to find you. So I don't know that I need to like leave.
RadioFreeMormon.org. That's the best place to go. Or you can look up Radio Free Mormon, archives. You can drink from the fire hose that is 343 episodes so far.
Well, I do like to end like this. What is your favorite what's the favorite thing that you've produced, and what's your favorite thing to like point people toward? It can be the same thing.
Well, that very first episode is a very, very good one because what it does is it lays out in, I think, unmistakable terms the fact that Boyd K. Packer, as an apostle, knew negative stuff about the church, and he knew that negative stuff could negatively impact people's testimonies. So what he told everybody was, you don't talk about it, you hide it, you don't write about it. Even if you're quoting somebody else who wrote about it, you don't quote them in your papers or in your research, because you don't want to pass along disease germs, is what he called it. So there's nothing that's more clear than this talk, saying that leaders of the church know critical information about the church, and their goal is to hide it and keep the members from knowing it.
And
so that's very
encourage
important.
Teachers to not say anything about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And threatening them in not so veiled language that if you go against what I'm telling you, then, you'll be looking for a job. And
well, it wasn't even that. It was like, you're a bad person. If you
and you'll be
if you feel this moral
in a very warm
indication,
place.
like
you're
if you
breaking
feel
your
this
covenants.
If you feel this moral implication to like say these things, well, don't. That is just you trying to get off, like, that's just you trying to clear your conscience, and that's selfish. It's like, what the?
Or get published, and get accolades of the world and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Which is all just negative casting that's being put on the pursuit of truth.
Yeah. We want to find truth as long as it isn't in this arena.
We want to find truth as long as it supports our church.
Yes, that's right.
That's the only truth that we're interested in.
Any
other truth need not apply.
Yes. Okay. Well, I highly recommend that one too. That was one that I've listened to and I liked it a lot. You did such a good job of going through it, and articulate, just like you were saying, you had people come up to you, say, oh, you helped me see something that was there, but you helped refine it. And that's definitely, yeah, you do a really good job doing it. So,
Well, let's just take this for an example, and I won't go to anything else. But this one, if you are a member of the church and you've been paying attention and you take it seriously and you're starting to get the idea that leaders of the church are hiding stuff from you, and why would they hide stuff from me? And is this really true? Or am I seeing things that aren't there? And then to stumble upon Radio Free Mormon #1 talking about this talk by Boyd K. Packer, right? Where he comes out and says, yeah, we know negative stuff about the church, and yeah, we're hiding it, and we're telling all the teachers to hide it from the students too. All of a sudden now you realize, oh, I'm not losing my mind. Not only am I seeing what's really happening, they actually talked about it.
right. Yep.
And then Elder Oaks in 1985, I think it was, to the same audience that Boyd K. Packer had spoken to in 81, which is in August at BYU, to the CES people, to all the professors, all the CES, church educational system, all the teachers, institute, seminary, whatever, that he's talking to. And Elder Oaks goes in front of them and says the exact same message, though it isn't the focus of his message. What he says is that the church has no obligation to tell both sides of the story.
Yeah, I think I remember that one too.
And I just went, really? You're actually saying this? That you don't have any obligation to tell both sides of the story, even when you're asking people to sacrifice everything that they are, can, or will be, or ever made in their life to the building up of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That's the covenant in the temple.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're asking people to do. But you're going to do that based upon only telling them the side that you want them to hear, that will get them to do that. But you're aware of all this other stuff. You're aware of the other side, but you just don't think it's your obligation to tell people that. Well, that is your obligation, Elder Oaks, when you're trying to get people to give things to the church, things up to and including everything that they are,
Mm-hmm.
or everything that they have. Of course you have a moral obligation, but he doesn't see it that way. Why? Because his definition of good is protecting the church so that people will come to it and be saved through the ordinances of the temple. And it is a very, what is the name of this? It's the ends justify the means. I'm forgetting the name of the term for that.
Oh, line for the Lord?
Utilitarianism.
Oh.
Utilitarianism, it came to me. Yeah. The ends justify the means. The ends are so good that whatever means are necessary will be justified in pursuing that end. And there can be no end greater than saving souls in the celestial kingdom. Therefore, the field is wide already to harvest when it comes to not telling members negative things about the church.
Right. Yes. And as you can see, RFM is super passionate about this even now. And here he goes. He goes on. And for your viewing pleasure. So you can catch him on all of his different
Paradisiacal glory.
Yes. So I really appreciate the time. You're a busy guy. So thanks for hanging out with me for an hour. So,
Hey, it's been a great time. I hope you'll let me know when this goes up, and I'll put it on my Facebook page.
okay. Sounds good. Thanks.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you so much, Marty. It's been a great time.
Okay, good. Bye.
Bye-bye.